Hello and welcome everyone on the Security, Continuity and Recovery PECB webinars. My name is Tim Rama and I'm the PECB organizer of this webinar. Today's topic is Establishing an Effective Information and Cybersecurity Team. This webinar will be hosted by PECB partner and trainer Mr. Craig Roswain, the Managing Director of Wolfpack Information Risk, who has more than 18 years of experience in cyber threat intelligence, research, training, and advisory services. Please write all your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, and we will answer to them accordingly. Please, Mr. Craig, you may start the presentation.
Well, Tim, thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're coming in from, and welcome to our session. Just a little quick before we start, just so you understand the context of what I'm going to be sharing with you in this session. We are a company that focuses on information governance, IT governance, information security, cybersecurity, and privacy. We call that information risk, and we started off focusing more on the research and the threat intelligence side. We do a lot of advisory within government and the private sectors, and as part of our relationship with PECB, we offer about 35 different courses and a lot of awareness programs to organizations. So we are product independent. We don't sell any products or hardware or software. So we're purely a services organization. So with that background, what I am going to be covering in today's session is we're going to be having a little bit of a look at threat intelligence, what is driving the whole uptake of cybersecurity. We're going to be looking at the actual strategies that organizations can adopt and really trying to get an understanding of dealing with a combined information and cybersecurity approach. And part of that is we're going to be looking at focusing quite heavily on the people aspect as well as the process and the technology components. And then as a final part, we can have a bit of fun. We'll talk a bit about the weakness when it comes to protecting our information, and that is the human element. And we'll talk about hacking the human. So let's get started, and we talk a bit about threat intelligence. So what is actually driving the whole uptake of cybersecurity? There's a number of things. You know, the Internet of Things is a common term used nowadays. It is really referred to the great uptake of technology. You know, the experts are saying that in the next 5 to 7 years, there will be over 200 billion devices connected to the Internet, connected with an IP address, and we are seeing technology from everything from cars, fridges, shoes, even toilets at the end of the day will have some sort of technology in that's going to be monitoring things and feeding information into the cloud. So this whole uptake of technology, we're seeing what is happening on the Internet, the huge uptake of social media, how companies are really, and individuals are creating terabytes of storage at a staggering rate. All this is part of the technology wave that is really pushing us forward into the 21st century. So all good things, all positive things, very exciting things happening in the space, and we are now looking at the cyber economy, the value of the online economy being worth about $3 trillion per annum. So you look at different industry reports, this is what they are saying, and you know, we look at that figure over there, $9 billion was the amount of money traded by one company in one day on the Internet. And that many of you will actually be aware of the company in China, a company called Alibaba, end of last year for the equivalent of Valentine's Day, Singles Day. That's how much money they transacted in one day online. And these figures are staggering. I mean, if you look at, we did a comparison of, so I'm from Wolfpack is a company based in South Africa, and if you look at the combined economies of the whole of Africa and most of the developed countries in the Middle East, their GDPs combined, their economies combined, is equivalent to about $3 trillion. So we can almost say that the cyber economy is equivalent to the combined economies of Africa and the developed countries in the Middle East. So we're seeing a lot of transactions happening on the internet. Once again, very, very positive. But with every good thing, there's always a bad thing. And we are very aware of the rise in cybercrime. You know, on the left-hand side, for example, we're seeing some of the documentation that was leaked by Edward Snowden around large-scale spying. What this shows is secret documents that were put in place, what they call the 5 R's, the USA, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, talking about how different large-scale communication platforms have been compromised, and we are seeing, you know, cyber espionage at very, very large scale happening around the world. The second picture over here, a very interesting report that the Kaspersky Lab brought out a few months ago. Yeah, they talk about different types of malware. So, you know, on the top right-hand side here, we see Stuxnet. Obviously, we know about the really one of the preeminent cyber war cases that where we saw the uranium enrichment facility being breached by malware, and all these different pieces of malware cooperating together to form really, really dangerous cyber weapons. This top piece here, for example, codenamed Fanny, was a piece of malware that can be run on memory sticks that is to you know, very high security government networks that are not connected to the internet. It actually allows the malware to traveling on memory sticks to actually compromise these different setups and then find an opening for the information to be exfiltrated back to the command and control center. Also here down in the bottom, for example, grey fish. We saw about how revelations of large hard drive manufacturers, typically called bootware software that runs on hard drives, so where certain government departments or entities have been targeted, you know, before you could even deploy any security, that hard drive has already been compromised. The moment you switch your machine on, doesn't matter what you're running, there is already a backdoor that's been established. So really scary discoveries being made in our space. So all of these things and a lot of other things, you know, in our country we see how cybercrime is costing our economy hundreds of millions of dollars each year, and I'm sure many of the viewers in their countries, we're all battling with cybercrime in our own respective economies. And once again, the large-scale cyber espionage is taking place, and the case is very much for governments in Africa and in many developing countries around the world have really been slow to understand the cyber risk and slow to respond, and have underestimated the amount of work in trying to roll out national initiatives to try and combat cyber risk. So that is a very, very quick summary of, you know, some of the key drivers. We can have a whole 2 days training session unpacking these different areas, but just for the interest of time and to set the scene as to why cyber is now such an important landmark. And so the question to now ask is, how do we actually go about protecting our countries, protecting our organizations, putting together a plan of action to try and deal with this threat? So as a starting point, you know, we're talking about information security, we're talking about cyber security. What is the difference? You know, we've had people saying, what's the difference between internet security and cyber security and information security? There is no difference, but there is a difference, and there is a difference of focus. So we always like to refer back to international standards, especially the ISO 27000 range, which is, you know, universally adopted as the de facto standards in our sector. And the definition of information security, according to industry practice and from an ISO point of view, it's really the preservation of confidentiality and integrity and availability of information. But from an information security point of view, we really see, you know, if you look at ISO 27001, the focus is on building and managing an information security management system in an organization. It's very much focused at an organizational level. when we start talking about cybersecurity, you know, and there we look at the guidelines for cybersecurity, the ISO 27032 standard. There they talk about the preservation of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information in cyberspace. So the scope of what we're trying to deal with is not just isolated to a company, but it is more focused around a whole ecosphere of what we're trying to protect. So we look at the threats facing an organization from an information point of view. We look at the threats facing a country or an organization or a critical infrastructure player from a cybersecurity point of view. Yes, you might be using similar tools, but really the motives behind the attacks are slightly different. And this diagram just kind of spells out how these different building blocks fit together and the focus areas of these different domains. I'm happy to take a question on this at a later stage just to unpack an area that you might need clarifying. So now that we understand the difference or the focus areas of information and cybersecurity, how do we go about managing the threat? So we've just got a very, very basic model that we adopt, that when we engage with our clients or within government, for example, just to try and put this into a bit more of a perspective to try and manage it more effectively. So the first thing that we need to try and do is to really analyze the threat and understand the threat, what it is we're trying to deal with. And, you know, gone are the days where an organization just looks at the threats or the risk to their own organization. So you need to factor that in, but depending on the industry that you're operating in, so for example, there might be 80% of threats that are common to all organizations out there, but if you are a bank or if you're a telecoms company, for example, there are specific threats, there are specific frauds that industry needs to be aware of. So it is vital as part of the whole threat intelligence aspect that an organization is part of an industry body, is talking to other, even though you might be competitors, but it is important that you are understanding the threats that are facing other players in your industry. Then we always recommend that organizations, especially those with a global footprint, understand wherever they've got an operation, that they understand the threats facing that particular country. So we obviously know that there are wars going on, there are certain factions, there are certain certain criminal entities operating in certain countries, and this spills over into our world as well. So you need to be aware of that. And then also, you also need to be aware of what your country or the country that you're operating in can provide for you. Is there a CERT, a computer security incident response team? What laws are there around data protection, for example, that you need to be aware of? And then finally, from a global perspective, you need to be aware of, you know, what are changing, as I mentioned earlier, the Internet of Things, new technologies coming out, new breaches that are, or new pieces of malware that are coming out. So the whole threat intelligence component is not an easy thing to get right, and it is something that is vital. So firstly, understand the threat. Once you've got an understanding of that, then you need to ask yourself, how are we able to deal with the threat as an organization or as an industry? And that's where you really need to have a serious look at your weaknesses, at your vulnerabilities, for example. So doing the necessary assessment. We recently, for our banking sector, for example, we created a cyber threat framework, and we created a self-assessment tool that all the different banks in our country actually utilized to baseline themselves as an industry and to see where the vulnerabilities are. So that's really what you need to look at. Do you have the right people in place? Are they properly skilled? Are the right processes in place? Are they being used? Do we have the right technology to actually defend against the threat that we identified? And then finally, once the gaps have been identified, then we need to improve. All right? So that's typically where training and awareness, rolling out technology, tightening up processes. So we normally recommend this as a model, and this obviously is a continuous improvement exercise, not something you just do as a once-off exercise, and that is it. From there, we recommend that an organization actually creates a solid information risk framework. Now, what does that mean? We put in place the necessary governance, risk, business alignment, operation components. So this central box over here is typically the role of an information security team. And in this case, we call it information risk because it's a combined information security, cybersecurity, privacy component, and it deals with all the elements of governance and risk, legal compliance, security architecture, asset management, managing HR, supplier management risk, physical risk, access control, telecoms and networking, software development and acquisition, cryptography, operation security, incident management, business continuity, and disaster recovery. So this is typically the function of the information risk department, so to say. Needs to align to business, needs to tie to, to support enterprise goals, to align to the bigger enterprise risk picture, etc., etc. And from a bottom looking down point of view, it needs to keep an eye on what IT is doing and various other operational functions in the business, such as facilities management, HR, physical security. It needs to put in place measures and be able to report back on the risk to senior stakeholders in the business. And then on the left-hand side, we have our governance structures in place. Typically in an organization, you have the board, executive board. We recommend building an information risk steering committee that has got senior stakeholders from areas of the business, of IT as well, that are involved in the decision-making of the information risk function, right down to the more operational, your change advisory boards, for example, procurement boards or steering committees, for example, as well. So this is the overarching framework that we normally recommend to clients once they've assessed to actually build this in place, to put the proper security, governance, risk structures in place. Then once that is done, as if you thought that was all you need to do and you can tick that box, well, you can tick that box, but there's other things that you need to do. And it is vital that, gone are the days where we can just have a firewall and antivirus and we can tick the security box. Nowadays we have to make sure that we have a layered defenses in place. We look at putting in place the right preventative controls, being able to detect. So we're seeing a strong movement of organizations now to move, to still do the preventative side, but now to move towards a more detective capability to see, especially information leaking from the organization. Whenever we engage with the client, whilst we're busy building the security capability, we always say, because normally as part of the assessment side, we normally pick up where there might have been breaches or there's information leaking already from the organization, to build a strong incident response capability. And this whole thing has to be tied into your business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis component. So, there's a number of very good international standards that can assist organizations in this place. 31,000, your enterprise risk management. 38,500, which is your IT governance. Of course, your 27,000 range of standards that are out there. Your information security risk management. On the other side, you've got your 20,000, which is your IT service management. 2735, which we're very excited about, that PECB actually brought out a incident management training program. We've written exams for that and are waiting to actually offer that to our clients down in South Africa as well. Your business continuity standards, and then your cybersecurity guidelines. So there's a wealth of information that organizations can adopt to make sure you build this into your layered security defenses. We normally recommend, as I said, to build an incident response capability, and as a key component of that, ISO 2735 is definitely a very good, backbone to use as building that. Other sources as well from COBIT, ITIL, and then first.org, which is the forum of incident response teams around the world. Also good to be a member of that group as well. So that was a bit of a quick walkthrough just to touch on the key building blocks to look at addressing that. Let's talk about the human element now and just have a look at where many organizations are really battling to bed down security is, and that's really trying to address the human risk. Now, this is a lovely slide from a company called Mandiant, which is part of FireEye, And based on large-scale incidents that they have been involved in analyzing, as well as there's some very good reports by the Verizon Data Breach Report, for example, that comes out where they analyze thousands of breaches that have happened around the world. When you actually unpack it, 8 out of 10 times, they can trace it back to either an employee or a contractor that was a victim of receiving a phishing or a vishing or an impersonation attack or being social engineered. And once that happens, there's generally custom malicious software that was applied to that person's machine. There is outside command and control of that device. And from there, once the foothold has been established, it's a matter of escalating your privileges and taking over more and more of your organization's network. And this can occur, this can happen over days, weeks, months, sometimes even years, without the organization being aware of it. So it is vital to understand where these attacks are coming from, because through proper training, through proper awareness, you're never going to stop every attack, but at least you can try and prevent a number of attacks from actually coming through. So we normally it's difficult to do it in a webinar environment, but normally in a classroom-based training, we actually ask the people in the room, maybe we could even ask if they want to just reply, but by the chat, maybe just get a bit of a discussion going here. And the question is, what can you actually trust more? A, what you hear on a phone when someone phones you, so the actual person's voice. Can you trust the caller ID? So you see a number coming in from a number that you recognize. It might even be a friend or a colleague, for example. Do you trust that more? Or do you trust getting an SMS from a known cell phone number? Maybe if we could just ask the people in the actual line, if they can maybe just via the chat facility, just enter which one you actually prefer more. A, B, or C? Which one can you trust more? I'll just give a few seconds for people. So if you click on the chat facility, you can actually just start typing in some answers there. Okay, so while people are busy typing away there, the reality is, yes, we can trust to a large degree some of these things, but everything can be spoofed. Everything can be, we can be the victims of social engineers or conned. So, for example, the first element, what you hear on the phone, I'm sure many of you are aware that there are a range of different, very advanced tools that you can actually use, where you can copy people's voices, for example. So there's a piece of technology that we actually use when we're doing social engineering attacks on an organization. I can convert my voice to make it sound like a child, or I can convert my voice to make it sound like a girl. So I'm just talking normally now, but obviously the synthesizer that we use actually makes it very difficult for a person to actually track the true identity of the person that you're actually dealing with. So that's probably your strongest security point, is to actually being able to hear the person's voice, someone that you know, but just bear in mind that these can be actually converted. If you get a number, even from your wife's phone or your husband's phone or a friend's, and you see that number coming in, most people 100% will trust that that is the person's number. But unfortunately, there are a number of different vishing tools, as we call them, that you can use, that you can load onto your cell phone, that you can use on a mobile phone, for example, that can mask your number as someone else's number. So we have a lot of fun in conferences where I actually phone someone in the audience, I get their wife's number, and when the phone rings, their wife's telephone number comes up on their phone along with their wife's picture. So it's fun, yes, but if you think of the physical or the security ramifications of this, it can actually lead to very, very scary circumstances. And similarly, there's a very tool that we are very respectful of, a whole suite of security tools under Kali Linux. So one of them that was very good was the SMS spoofing capability. it's subsequently been taken out of the Kali suite as well. But there, as you can see on the screen, you can actually send an SMS attack on a single number, or you can do a mass SMS attack literally by spoofing a mobile number, for example. So if you think about an organization, maybe for their business continuity, they have a SMS functionality where they send out a warning or emergency response type of message from a trusted central number. You can spoof that number, and they would get it and think it is a real incident, and it can cause a lot of trouble out there as well. So just to highlight these points, from a human element, it's really difficult to try and protect our users. What we really recommend is awareness. And there, for example, we firmly believe awareness programs in organizations need to be fun, they need to be thought-provoking, and you need to use a whole different variety of mediums, such as a learning management system with animated videos, cartoons, simulations, screensavers, reinforce it with posters, face-to-face training, etc. And this is really one of your key defenses to protect your humans from, or your employees from, being hacked. From a training point of view, we also recommend, especially for maybe bigger organizations, to invest more time and effort on actually training your people. What also works quite well is for an industry to get together and to actually build a training program for that particular industry. So, once people come together and they start sharing their budgets, they can actually get a lot more done with less. So a lot more bang for buck. This is just a high-level prototype that we normally use. So, it's always good to have a skills assessment that gets done on the team, so you can see what the current capabilities of your staff members are, and then to create a baseline training program. What we normally do, for example, is we take one or two, like we'll take ISO 27001 and 2, combine it with something from CISSP or some other certification, and that is the baseline program that all security and other related staff from IT, HR, for example, needs to go through, so that everyone's on the same base. Then you need to break it up into your red team and your blue team, so typically your attack team or your more technical team, for example, and then maybe your blue team, who's normally the defenders, can be more risk governance, more security management type courses, whereas your red team is going to get exposed to a lot more detailed technical programs. And ultimately, an organization needs to have, just as any government has an elite, like the Navy SEALs or the SAS, you need to have an elite group of highly skilled individuals, especially when it comes to dealing with incidents in the organization, that is going to be able to respond to incidents very swiftly and provide a deep level of assurance to management that you're able to deal with large-scale breaches. So there I've just really summarized, from looking at the different types of threats facing organizations, to a high-level approach to dealing with information security and cyber a lot more strategically, to the importance of a training program, to the importance of awareness, and especially when it comes to your users being hacked, for example. So that really is my my talk today. We run this. People always ask about the name of Wolfpack. Why did you call your organization Wolfpack? And if you look at the concept of a wolf, a wolf on its own has got a much lower chance of survival. Wolves in a pack can band together. They can hunt down bigger prey and feed not only themselves but the rest of the pack. They can defend against bigger enemies. Wolves definitely have different roles in the pack. So you have the alpha wolf, the beta wolf, and this one's responsible for looking after the children. This one's responsible for hunting, etc. So we really love the whole concept of this collaboration, and we are driving a number of key initiatives in the country between government and the private sector to try and take care of our critical infrastructure, to look at large-scale training programs, a national awareness site as well. So there's no ways that any one company or even a country on their own can deal with the full breadth of what cyber risk is thrown at us. We have to join forces, and we really have to get that protection in the pack. So that is my talk for now. Tim, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, and if you can maybe highlight some questions that we can go through.
Thank you very much, Craig, for this great presentation. We will be waiting for some questions if attendees may have and answer quickly. So the first question that we have from Enrique, the question is, what would be the best way to verify someone's identity by phone?
So if you are in a high-risk environment, and I'm typically talking about working for a law enforcement or intelligence agency, there are predefined ways that when you phone me, I mean, the chances are if you phone me and I see your number coming through and I hear your voice, the chances are, probably 99%. I can also understand the mannerisms of how you talk. So if I know you, it's going to be very difficult to try and fool someone, right? But if it is someone that I've never spoken to before, then it's a different story. You can arrange before the time, either via an encrypted email, to have a challenge code where it could be a 4-digit code or a certain code name, for example. If you are extra paranoid, just to validate that it is the person that you are speaking to.
Thank you. The second question is from Pralad. Is there an IVR solution to verify?
I'm not too sure about that. From an attacker's perspective, we do know that can be a vector that an attacker that's targeting your organization can definitely tap into that. Even if you listen to some of one of the greatest social engineers case studies, Kevin Mitnick, they talk about how they, some of the case studies where they actually utilize that to gain access to people's mailbox folders and use that to social engineer other employees in the organization. I think it's going to depend very much on the different vendor type of platforms, what is out there. And you really need to have a look at that. The one attack which is slightly, it's linked to it, but it's slightly different, that we saw happening here, for example, and it was based on the older Nortel voice over IP platform. There was a vulnerability whereby many people for their voice mailbox didn't change the default passwords. So what attackers would do is they would conduct war dialing to the organization, and they would try and phone different extensions until they got an extension that went to voicemail. And through the different options in the menu facility, they were actually able to get access to the mailbox. And one of the functions there was to actually redirect the telephone call to a determined number. So that they would select that option. They would put an international, it would either be one of these chat sites overseas or a porn site overseas, for example, that is actually there to charge, let's say, 10 euros a minute or something. They would put the phone down, and then they would phone. Once they got a couple of these extensions compromised, they would actually then phone a number of these extensions on a Friday afternoon, and these calls would be rerouted, redirected to these high premium telephone numbers, and of course they would receive an associate or an affiliate commission on all these things. So the poor companies that were targeted, sometimes it took a month for them to pick this up. They ended up getting huge telephone bills when they got their bills.
Thank you. The last question we will take is from Tasso. The question is, what are the top current issues faced by the cybersecurity industry? Is the shortage of people experts or increasing things on the internet?
I would say both, because both are increasing exponentially. So, it's really difficult to try and keep, we're involved in this business on a full-time basis, but even for us, it's really hard to try and keep abreast of all the threats that are out there. So that's really a complexity that countries are or companies are trying to manage. The skill side, I mean, it is really a big challenge, especially in South Africa. We see a lot of our people leaving and going work overseas, and I'm sure many other countries are facing similar challenges. I mean, one of the reports we read was about the US government indicating a shortage of 10,000 people, cybersecurity people, for government alone. So there's no doubt that there is a huge skills shortage. One of the issues we found in our country as well was we did a large cyber threat barometer report, a research report on the current state of our country's readiness. Especially on law enforcement, police stations were not geared up properly to allow citizens to report cybercrime. Investigators did not have the proper tools. The cyber forensic investigators were not capable of, getting evidence in a protected format that could be used to prosecute people. Even the courts didn't have the proper laws in place. The prosecutors weren't trained. So, across the whole sort of chain of people that are involved in the space, it is definitely one of the main challenges is skills.
Okay, and since we have a little bit more time, we will continue taking some other questions as well. The next question is from Adam. Who should a CISO report to in an organization?
And we get asked this question a lot. If I go back to my previous slide, let me just quickly go back to the one where we had the structures in place, right? Okay. So traditionally, and part of this, one of the surveys we did in South Africa was we asked about 100 companies, where does information security report to? Over 2/3 of the respondents at that stage said that it reports to the CIO, so it reports to IT. But we're seeing a definite shifting away of information security reporting into IT. And why? Because IT is a high risk area, and if you are the ISO or the CISO and you are reporting to the CIO and you are reporting, almost auditing the IT environment, it's not a good place to be where you are bringing down your boss's environment. It's difficult to be impartial, right? And also with cyber, I think cyber has introduced a much higher level of risk now. So we are seeing a shift of moving it out of IT and definitely moving more to reporting either to the chief operating officer, reporting into risk, and even instances risk and compliance. And in some organizations, we're actually seeing, if it's a senior role, the chief information security officer actually reporting into the board as well to provide assurance there. So definitely a shift away from IT. The other angle is it also depends on the nature of the business. So if it is very much an IT-focused organization, if it's an online business, for example, and there's a strong dependence on IT, and IT does have a seat at the executive committee as well, then, and as long as there's strong support and an understanding that information and cybersecurity includes IT, but it's a lot broader than that, and it is the maturity around it, then, it all depends on the maturity of the CIO. The last little point is we're also seeing CIOs, not just calling them, they're actually becoming more chief information with an emphasis on information officer. So kind of moving away from just IT and actually providing that governance around information in an organization. So not only are we seeing a change of information security reporting nouns, but you're also seeing a bit of a change on IT because of IT becoming so important in an organization as well. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And the last question for today is from Adefemi. What identity management strategies should enterprises be deploying to ensure they could meet the security challenges of an increasingly connected and cloud-based business environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And typically, when we see organizations going on rolling out a large-scale identity and access management solution, these are normally very long-term projects. Many projects don't actually get finished because of the complexity of what you're actually trying to deal with. And what's complicating the process even more now is we don't just have a static, solid organization. Our people are everywhere. They're accessing from a range of different devices. Think about your smartphone and your tablet. We've got integrated suppliers, contractors, third parties integrating into client environments. So this has really complicated the identity and access environment even more. So it is not an easy task to do. And there's a number of different strategies, and there's a number of different solutions that organizations can actually adopt. I would actually say that's almost a presentation on its own. And let's maybe get in an identity and access management expert to actually come and share and provide a bit of counseling on this particular topic. Tim?
Yes, we will try to do that, to find one, and hopefully we will make another webinar on this topic. So thank you once again, Craig. Thank you for this great presentation. It was quite informative. And I want to thank all the attendees as well for taking the time out of your busy schedules for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. We have received all your questions, and because the time is limited, we will answer to your questions individually by email. Please check the PECB's webinar schedule in our website, www.pecb.org, or our official social media network, since next week we are organizing other webinars with interesting topics as well. For next Wednesday, regarding security continuity and recovery, the next topic will be the ISMS structure, the importance of managing people, processes, business, operation, and training and awareness within ISO 27001. Thank you all once again. Thank you, Craig, and I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone.